disability dream and step out? And why are there so few pastors who are disabled pastoring churches? We have to train our congregations to wake up, get your blinders off, and if somebody loves God, let them have a chance. And don't think, oh, well, what will our friends think? Who cares about what your friends think? What does God think, and what do you personally think? And God will take care of us. And you know, when outsiders come to our church, they are blown away with the fact that here is a guy with a disability who's loving God. If he can love God in that wheelchair, then what's wrong with me? So it can be used as a powerful witnessing tool to encourage people to let God use the best they have and not feel sorry for themselves.
Yeah, and that makes me think too about a lot of folks with disabilities are unemployed. And it's not necessarily because they simply have no skills with which they could be paid for, but because they just get written off and assume that
No opportunity, no chance.
right, yeah, you're a fire hazard, or you're an insurance hazard. We couldn't consider taking you on because you'd be a problem for our insurance company, or that kind of thing. So yeah, there's and that's really important to think about. Yeah, all those barriers that folks face as we live with disabilities. You're such a positive person. I'm sure you don't dwell on these kinds of things, but I assume that over the years you think, well, you gave one example with the dating, but maybe are there other examples too of painful interactions you've had with other people through the years because of misunderstanding and prejudice as a result of your disability?
Of course. There's just the idea of people categorizing you to be useful to help people with disabilities. That's something you have to fight against. I think also with people, as a pastor, people get disgruntled, people get upset, people have problems and they want to discuss it. I've noticed that some people are afraid to really say, I really got offended when you said something, or I didn't like that message, or somebody that, but they won't say it to me because we don't want to offend him because he's in a wheelchair. You know, it's kind of like, shut up. If I can face life in a wheelchair, you can say anything you want to me. I'm not going to freak out on you. But people are afraid to treat me like a normal guy, you know what I'm saying? And I have to tell people, I've heard people say, my church secretary might say, well, so-and-so's been getting upset, they're thinking of leaving the church. You know, it happens in every church, and every pastor has one of the hard things about being a pastor is all the discrimination you got to deal with. And I would say, well, why don't they tell me about it first? Well, they're afraid they'll hurt you. Well, so what? They're going to hurt me if they leave. Because I'll carry everybody's, how it is when you lose somebody as a church member. So I'll say, well, then let's deal with it. Let's talk about it. Well, they're afraid, So I think that's a problem if you're disabled. People think you've got it rough and we don't want to tip them over the apple cart, But I believe if you're going to be out there, they say if you can't stand the heat, don't cook in the kitchen. So I believe if you're going to be disabled and you're going to get out there like I have, I believe you need a level playing field, and I work really hard for a level playing field. Now, there have been churches I've candidated in where I had no chance because the people couldn't look past my disability, and the search committee and the calling committee, they didn't know how to say to me, we're just uncomfortable with your physical deformity, and we think we're not sure we could handle you. Well, they won't say that. They'll think, well, we just don't feel God wants you here. Okay, well, I've heard that before, But anyway, let's be honest. Let's be truthful. We of all people shouldn't give people bologna sausage. We should give the truth as Jesus says, live in the truth and be open and honest. So I think that hurts in the disability ministry because we just have to start being more honest with people. And if you tell a disabled person you're uncomfortable around them, it's healthy. And it helps them. I don't want to take too much time. There was a guy in Bible college. When I went to Bible college, I left home, and my brother went with me for the first semester. But I went needing help. And I wanted to go to Bible college so bad, and I wanted to just study the Bible so greatly, that I went to North Central Bible College in Minneapolis. I ended up having to ask strangers to help me get dressed. Strangers to help me go to the restroom. Even in class, I asked the guy, say, you don't know me, and whatever, but I needed to help me sit on the commode, help clean me and pull my pants up. Sometimes I wouldn't want to do that, but when you gotta go, you gotta go. So I was known sometimes. I could see some guys hide when I walked down the hall. And I could see some guys were a little, there's that thick guy, he might ask me to help to the bathroom. They'd run out. So there was one particular guy named Charlie, and he admitted to me he was from Waupaca, Wisconsin. A small town, not seen too many handicapped people. And like there's some people who've never seen certain races because they live where they are and they get all nervous about it. So anyway, to make a long story short, he ended up God telling him, you help Ken Dignan. So he said, I can't, I'm afraid of him. So one day he ended up admitting to me, Ken, I'm afraid of you. I said, why? He says, I just don't know. Your disability makes me uncomfortable, and maybe it makes me feel that there are things in life that are uncomfortable, and there are things that happen to people that I can't deal with. So we had a great talk, and he ended up helping me. Lo and behold, he ended up being called by God to start a ministry called Special Touch Ministries, which was through the Assemblies of God having a camp for people with disabilities. And they had a goal to put one in all 50 states. We've got one in like about 25 states now. He ended up being called to full-time disability ministry because he was afraid to help me. So God used him to do this. So those things are and still even today, kind of like you have to fight past I'm 57, and I know that Joe Paterno, coach, he's 82. I know Bobby Bowden, I'm a real sports fan, but Florida State, he's 79 or something, whatever. So, some people think, well, Pastor Ken, you're 57 now, you're thinking of retirement. If you're disabled or not, if you're 401 or you're whatever went down the tubes 6 weeks ago, you got nothing left anyways. I'm preaching till I die, So I'm telling you, give me a break. As long as I don't commit adultery or steal the money, leave me alone,
Maybe folks would find it helpful just to hear a little bit more about interaction, about dealing with our own discomfort around someone living with a disability, or the caregiver of someone living with a disability. What are the things that you found helpful personally? And you mentioned that already, but maybe you could say a little bit more about that in terms of, this one man just admitted to you. What are some other things that you found helpful in terms of so that people can minister and deal with their own discomfort?
Yeah, I think most people who are disabled don't mind if you open a door for them. There are some really tough disabled people who are bitter and angry. And if you open the door, don't you open the door, I'm not crippled. Then go, well, I'll never open the door again for another guy in a wheelchair because they yelled at, or whatever. Those people to me are more few and far between. If you're kind and you want to open somebody a door, if you open a door for me, I will always say thank you. Or if you want to help me with a glass of water, I'm not going to say, what do you think, I'm disabled? Don't be afraid to offer. And if somebody gets a little miffed, they'll understand it. So I think the idea is to just be able to talk to people. If you're a Christian, ask God to help you. Talk to somebody who's disabled. Talk to a family who has a disabled member. Oh, the church could do so much more. That's a whole topic. We, of all people, should be the most involved, and it drives me nuts. I have to admit, I am sick of it. John Harrison, Todd's ministry, did 50 million Americans are touched by disability. 50 million homes have somebody who are disabled in it. Not just bringing in people with AIDS and all kinds of diseases and all kinds of stuff, even old age or dementia or whatever. But that's a lot of people. 2% go to church. How many of your churches have many, many people in wheelchairs or disabilities in your congregation? We should, of all people, have to break down the doors because we've got so many people in wheelchairs and disabilities that our main growth is from that. That's a mission field out there that should just be done by you. It should be done by every single church and every single Christian. And I'm not trying to give a guilt trip at all, but these are things we have to learn to deal with as Christians. And I'm so glad about opportunities like this to let the body of Christ know, let's get out there. We had a woman visit our church, and she has a child with a serious genetic disease, and it's a long name. She'd go to churches, and her child was even harder to deal with than autism and things on that line. She says very few churches welcomed them, and very few churches would give her child one teacher. One teacher for Sunday school. They'd still make this girl stay in the whole class with everybody else. She couldn't do that. So when she came to our church, we gave her one teacher, like for special needs. And this one teacher takes her aside and gives her the lesson on her own. And the family's been blown away. Well, of course, we have many people in our church in wheelchairs, and we have many people who have cognitive, and we have people with cognitive delays or mental disabilities, and we don't put them off in another room than the puppet and Kermit and all that stuff. You can do that, and God bless it. We let them sit in the whole service. And they'll sit in the front row, and they will clap their hands, and they're from a Reformed background, but they're almost Pentecostal. Because, it might freak people out. They're making noises, and hallelujah, God, It doesn't bother me because I'm used to that from my former background, but for other people it might. And they're having the time of their life They'll have tears in their eyes. If they hear one word, they'll hug you. So, I mean, Jesus had become like a little child. So we've had some people visit our church. They said, we're uncomfortable at that church because those people scare me. You understand what I'm saying? Why should we, of all people, be scared of people who are different or have disabilities? So I think we as church people and as congregations, if we can all get a passion and a burden to let families know they are more than welcome to our church, and to do all we can to break down any barriers, and then to help families, help them with cutting their grass and changing the oil, or if it's a single parent, or even two parents, to say, why don't you guys go out? We're sending 2 people from our church over to sit with your disabled member so you can go out on a date with your wife, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. And I've got this tons of ideas, and I'll talk all night.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's such a significant way for churches to engage in ministry, is to think about the whole broad issue. So pastoral care goes way beyond the one-on-one visit, but just think about the whole family situation and the needs of, like you mentioned, so for parents just to have some time with the 2 of them, if they have a child with a disability, those sorts of things. So, in what ways have you found that other people want to try to fix you? And what do you believe is the best antidote to that fix-it mentality that most of us have in caring for others? And the fix-it mentality that I'm thinking of is, well, if one would do this, or talk once in a while, you'll feel better. And I don't know, my sooner you've had to deal with some of that too. And so maybe if you talk a little bit more about that.
That's a very, very good question. Pentecostal background, there is some doctrines in the Pentecostal church that you'll see them on television. Now, I'm not a TV preacher like that, but they will give you the idea that if you have enough faith, that you'll be able to be healed. And I've had that. That's one of the things that led me a bit away from now. I'm probably more comfortable with Reformed Baptist congregational, because I kind of had a little bit enough of people trying to heal me. I had enough oil poured on me to open up 3 gas stations. I mean, I had enough hands on me that I had tattoo of fingerprints. Oh, God, heal them. And they'd be knocking me over in my wheelchair, trying to make me fall backwards like they do. But God bless it. But I kind of got so uncomfortable with that. That's what led me to write my book, The Healing Comes. Say, not everybody's going to have a Disneyland life. Some people can eat a ton of food and not gain a pound. Me, if I smoke pizza, I gain 10 pounds, I'm sitting in a wheelchair. All of us are different, but we don't let God make us different. So that's kind of a thing like that right there. But if we can, I'm just saying I'm already fine. Sure, I wouldn't mind being cured. I wouldn't mind having a quote gigantic miracle of like my limbs growing and my brace falling off and being like Forrest Gump running. Yeah, if that's not going to happen to me, and I've accepted that. So people want to fix you if you're depressed. Oh, read the Bible more. I've had so many people, listen to Christian hymns and your depression will melt away. If you're chemically depressed, give me a break. And we had to learn that firsthand with our 16-year-old son when he was 16, Ryan, our third-born son. And you can get a copy of my book. He went to Carl Sandburg High School. He was like 6 foot, a tremendous athlete, AP student, straight A's. And in his second semester in his junior year, he closed down, wanted to drop out of school, wanted to kill himself. And we had no clue what was going on. He ended up being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had heard of manic depression. I knew what might happen to my grandfather. But until you have someone in your family that was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you don't have a clue about it. But to make a long story short, sadly enough, he went through so much. He was brilliant, but then he'd be manic sometimes where he'd stay awake for 3 days and think he could conquer the world. He'd be so depressed for 3 days he couldn't get out of bed. So how do you take a really young man who's 16, 17 years old, how do you deal that with him? Well, that's a whole different topic. But sadly enough, he ended up being so filled with pain that on December 14, 2002, he took his own life in our basement by hanging himself in our basement. And the nightmare of that, going through that, plus my disability and losing a sister in a car accident at age 17, sometimes you begin to think that Job had it easy. You begin to ended up getting a whole new life. Probably the only thing he didn't get, we don't know, was a new wife that he got somehow. But anyway. And stuff like that. There's some people who go through so much suffering that it's a mystery, we don't understand it. But I think we handle that. But we naturally want to help people, and we naturally want to fix people. But sometimes the best thing we can do is just love them and pray for them and not try to give them an answer, but just to be there. Not like Job's 3 friends or Job's wife. Why don't you just kill God and die? We don't want you to blame God and die, honey, We need to encourage each other. And that's what's better than trying to fix everybody.
In terms of the most important people, maybe could you say a little bit more, maybe in terms of your son, Ryan, or maybe just in terms of your own life, but in what ways have you found people to be most helpful as you've been dealing with the challenges in your life?
Well, I think obviously, and by the way, I could probably write a whole book about my wife, my wife, Joni, a tremendous, unbelievable woman. I mean, she has helped me her whole life. We've been married 33 years. We dated for 2 years. She's been my best friend for 35 years. And she's been my main caregiver till she herself, she's only 5'2", probably 5'1", only like 110 pounds. So she was able to lift me up, and amazing. But then she got arthritis, and then her neck began to bother her, and they found some deterioration in her degenerative neck, and so she can't help me up anymore. So I've had to have a caregiver from 7:30 till 3:30 every day, and a driver. I ended up not being able to drive. About 10 years ago, I got post-polio, so I began to fall more, and I used to walk, but then I couldn't walk, and now I can't walk at all. I can't drive anymore, so it's exciting. But anyway, we go on with God's help. But I think my wife, obviously, I know that, and my sons. My 3 sons, and now we just had our first grandbaby, Riley Ann, born 4 weeks ago at Palos Hospital. My 31-year-old son and his wife, Joy, he went to Trinity International University, met her there. And just a tremendous support. My sons they're just great. I remember my son Patrick, his friend said, "Boy, your dad's crippled." My son Patrick said, "No, he's not." Kind of like, when your children grow up, they think you're Superman. And it's kind of neat to just see it's all in your perspective. It's all, and then the people of the churches I've pastored. When people have given me a chance and they've let me pastor them. And I tell you, there's one thing people know, that I can relate to hurt. I can relate to suffering. And everybody suffers. Everyone has hurt. Everyone has pain. So they know even in my preaching that I can preach a message to help everybody. Even people who have anorexia, they could be beautiful girls, but in the mirror they are fat and ugly in their mind. And I know what that's about because I had a sister who suffered with anorexia or bulimia. So in my preaching, the people of my church who've gotten to know me, many have said, "Can we forget you're even disabled? Don't forget to help me or to open the door or whatever." So I can say in all the churches I've pastored, it's been a phenomenal blessing in 33 years to have met the people of the congregations, and then to see the people that I've been able to bless and help grow in Christ, and to see marriages restored, and to see young people blessed, and then for young people of the churches I've pastored to have seen a handicapped pastor, and then to have a different mentality for people with disabilities. So I think those things have really helped me to really meet the people along the way that have been able to love me and care for me as Ken and Pastor Ken, as they call me.
What have you found that most non-disabled people don't understand about living with disability, and would be helpful to understand in showing care to someone who is disabled?
I think that if some could just be honest and say, "Hey, anything you need, I'd be happy to try to help if I can," or just taking the time to get to know somebody's needs, or to volunteer to be available and to assist if anything. I believe that sometimes it's hard, and disabled people, even though we should be able to, we're afraid to ask for help sometimes. But if somebody comes up to you and says, "Anytime you need me, I'll be happy to help you in any way I can." I've got guys in my church, whether they're elders or deacons or leaders in the men's ministry, who have ended up saying, "Hey, if you ever need a ride at any time of the day, here's my cell number." And I've got guys that my wife can't see now, I need a ride to church. And I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I don't want people to think, do it that night because pastor doesn't have a ride. No, I keep a schedule. I usually work 13 hours a day. I start at 9 in the office, and I usually go at night meetings till 10 o'clock. Thank God I've got the energy. Thank God I'm thankful. But even if I need a ride, there's guys, they will say, I've got guys lined up to be a free taxi, you know what I'm saying? But guys have been to volunteer, and they've said, well, I'll do it, and then you do it, and then I'll do it tomorrow, and then you do it that day. Kind of like, wow, the blessing to have people. And for women to go over and say to my wife, I'll help you do this, or you need help there, because her hands are full, because she works full-time at Sandburg High School as a computer tech now. And, people to just be available, and to be willing to talk to somebody who has a disability, and to be called alongside of them. And to support their family, and to do anything you can for that. Boy, you'd be surprised. Your church will be known as people who help families with disabilities, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, it sure is, because as churches become more open to that, they become more open congregations in general.
Of course, definitely.
Now that's the end of the questions, but I did have one other one that I wanted to follow up on, because for lots of folks who have disabilities, the future holds the prospect of being able to do less than they can do now. And that's true for you. That when you developed post-polio syndrome, you ended up being able to do even less. And for someone with multiple sclerosis, they can walk now, and 5 years from now they won't be able to walk, and then 10 years from now they won't be able to feed themselves, and so on. Can you talk a little bit more about what that's been like for you to lose some of the abilities that you had? So that's like your disability just sort of echoes through the polio keeps on echoing through the years.
Yeah, that's obviously a tough question. For me, tough, because at this place I haven't yet wanted to affect my daily activities. Basically, what I've done is supplement it with drivers, with using my kids, my wife, and it does get more expensive because I have to pay $500 a week now to a caregiver, and that's $2,000 a month or more, and stuff like that. So, you do have those extra things. But, it does concern me. I know it could and might happen, where I might have to slow down a bit, and I do push myself very strongly, and I get bed sores, I'm sitting all the time, and I can get my brace hurts me, and so I know there's more limitations now. So I'm at that place. So I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, because I know I'm finding it myself. And I'm not wanting to give in to that, because I've kind of fought that my whole life. So it is a very good question, and it's something that I'll have to deal with. But I want people, my goal is to have people in the church where I'm at, or whatever church, to not do it for me. To not say, well, we can tell he's going to have to slow down, so let's make him go part-time, that kind of stuff. I would hope that people in congregations, in my case, or in jobs, that they might, let the person make up their mind. And if they can keep, and I don't want pity, so I don't want somebody to say we don't expect as much. I still want them to expect as much as possible, but let me be the one to say, well, I've got to pull back, if you know what I'm saying. So, but I think, it's a vulnerability you have to get. It's an acceptance you have to get to. And I'm at the place now where I understand that, and, people think of retirement. My dad retired when he was 62. He's 80 now. I know that I can't retire financially when I'm 62, so it would have to be a miracle. I don't buy lottery tickets, but somebody would have to slip one down me and have to tell the congregation, I didn't buy it, God gave it to me. Yeah, right. But, unless a miracle happens, I've got to find a way. Because when you're on Social Security or disability, if you know that, you're not given a whole lot of money. And I'm not rich, but I do have a lot of things that I have to do. So I don't know that answer, and I've never at this time had to go on disability yet. I've always worked in the ministry since I was 25 years old, and I've always had a full-time ministry job. So I've been blessed like that. So, but I do understand that it's out there, and my only question, my answer would be, I understand my limitations, and when that comes, I'll have to ask God for the grace to be able to know what to do and how to handle that. But I only hope the people around me will be as gracious and understanding too. So if I can continue to build that acceptance with the people that are around me, hopefully we can all grow through it together.
Can you conclude
yes.
For us?
Well, I appreciate this opportunity, and I really like to say that if all of us could begin to pray for God to help each of us deal with our own limitations, because we all have them, and to realize that suffering is given to us as a gift because it humbles us. And humility is not easy. And we all have to want to be independent. But when you're dependent on others, it helps you to become more dependent on God. So So I think if we can revel in our weaknesses, and that we can be humble before God, and we can relate more to Christ. Because He came as God, and He was rejected. He hung on a cross naked. He was beaten and bruised beyond recognition, as Isaiah 53 told us. So I think if we can let that be a humble thing for all of us to be careful. As the preacher was walking with D.L. Moody in the older days back down Maxwell Street, looked at all these derelicts, and one of his preacher friends looked at all the derelicts laying on the ground and saying, "Oh, tis, what's their problem? Can't they get a job?" D.L. Moody turned to his friend, and we all know the famous quote. He said, "But for the grace of God, there go I." So if we can see that any minute you could have a stroke, and you could be in a scooter just like me. You might think it'll never happen to you, but we need to see we are limited. That sin's limited all of us, and that we're all terminal. And it's just a matter of when we get there. So we can have that more compassion and be open to Christ and let God use us in our churches. And if we could pray for God to raise up as many Christian churches from all denominations to have compassion for people with disabilities, I can tell you, I would hope that we could have a revolution. Let's not depend on the government. Let's not depend on government programs. Let's more have faith-based programs. And let's let the church lead the way for people with disabilities. And if there's anything that the church can do to do that, we need to.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was just wondering actually, Jan reminded me, so I appreciate Jan mentioning that if any of you have questions for Ken, he has to get going in a few minutes, but if any of you have questions for him before he has to leave.
If anything's off the top of your head, no questions off base or off limits, anything's on your mind? Yes.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned that you were on TV.
Yeah, hey, I'm on the Total Living Network, and that's you have to have Comcast cable. It's 138. It used to be 67, but they moved to digital, and it's the Total Living Network. And I'm on. It's gone late because it's cheaper. It used to be on at 4:30, and that was $350 a week. I'm on at 11:30 at night, and it's $150 a week for the airtime, and the production costs about $1,500 for 4 programs. So if you got a DVR, you can tape it, but it just says Ken Dignan. You'll find it on your Comcast cable, 138, and now it's on all over the Chicago area. It goes up into almost Milwaukee, over I think to almost Grand Rapids, Indianapolis, Springfield, and maybe over toward Cedar Rapids. But Comcast cable, 138 every Sunday night at 11:30 at night.
And is it just you?
I teach Bible practical truths of anything from the Scriptures.
Okay.
And I've got Bible scriptures. It's on themes of how to know God's will, how to handle suffering, how to read the Bible, basically any topics that I go through, how to pray. And I deal with a lot of areas of people who have weaknesses and problems and difficulties. Many people call me from all over the country. It's amazing. One woman, I could talk for ages about that, but one woman even in Pennsylvania, I'm also on Family, which goes all over the whole country. She was watching the program, but before that, she'd had bipolar. She had just purchased a gun. She was ready to kill herself that day. And she'd been at a church where they said, by now you should be over your depression. You should have listened to all the Christian teaching tapes and the Christian contemporary worship tapes. They said, your mind should be healed by now. Since it's not, we can't help you. So she thought if the church turned their back on her, she said, God, I'll give you one more chance, and I'll make it really hard for you, God. I want to hear a Christian TV preacher mention the word bipolar on a Christian television station. And that day I began talking about what we went through with my son, who had bipolar. She fell over. Had never heard a preacher in all of her life talk about bipolar on a Christian TV station. She called me, and I got to minister to her personally on the telephone as she called our 800 number. And I get those kind of experiences. There's a disability home in Phoenix, Arizona. On Family Night, I was on at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so that would be 3:30 a.m. in Phoenix time. But they all set their alarm on Sundays, and they get up and they have church with me at 3:30 a.m. in this Christian home for people with disabilities. So it's just amazing to just hear how God can use a program like that. It just goes on all over the area.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so pray for that. Any other questions at all? Any questions, fine. Any thoughts you might have or any things you want to ask me? Yeah,
Did you ever go through a period in your life where you were just really angry with God because of your disability?
I think discouraged, I think questioning. You could probably at times say angry in a way. I'm fortunate, and I can't take the credit for it. I'm fortunate that I've been wired somehow by God to seem to understand that this is all I've known. And this is all I've known, and I've been raised enough in my heart to know, sure, do I get discouraged and do I just get overwhelmed at times? Of course. And does the pain at times, the chronic pain I have, does it just get unbearable at times? Yes. But I keep holding my breath, trying to be strong with God. But there are days I'll bawl like a baby. There are times in private I'll just cry out to God, I don't know, I don't understand. So I think that is true in my life. And the frustration levels can be there, and they are there at times. But I don't really doubt God. I don't disbelieve him that there's a God. I don't get angry with him like mad because I know that he's got a mystery. And I relate more to the secret things of God. I relate more to the mysteries of God that we don't always know. But we will know, as it says in 1 Corinthians 13, we see in a glass darkly. But then when we see him, we'll understand him face to face. And how it says in Isaiah, I think it's 55 or somewhere in there, he says, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. And I relate to those passages somehow. And I do try, as a Catholic, my grandmother from Ireland, by the way, my grandfather missed the Titanic. So he came over here in 1914, and he just missed the Titanic. And he'd always say, Kenneth, nothing, like, don't worry about your polio there. But just think about look up at the Titanic, we've never been here before. So I've learned God's delays are God's ways to teach us. He'll still bless us. So that's what my grandmother Patrick O'Dakin said from County Mayo there at Long Island. So I learned even from my background that God still has his hand in your life. And that you have to see that God's delay could be God's blessing. And he taught me that by missing the Titanic. Any other questions? Well, I really appreciate this opportunity to be here, and God bless you. And take a card, or I'll leave some cards. Maybe a couple folks left back with jam. And if you want to pick some up later, or if there's anything I can do for you or your church, let me know. My church lets me be free to minister in any way I can. Thank you.
One of the things we do more, and a lot of this we can go through quickly because Ken already talked about a lot of these things. That whole matter of grief, in terms of the loss that comes when disability comes into someone's life, or the life of someone that a person loves. So I'm thinking also about caregivers, whether it's parents or a spouse. There's a fairly common pattern that this Dr. Greg Alvarez has seen. Now, the danger of any kind of model like this is that it looks very neat and simple. And life dealing with disability or any kind of suffering is anything but neat and simple. But the idea is just to give kind of help us. Remember, this is one of our goals is to have this basic understanding of living with disability or chronic illness. And that it's very common for folks to have a reaction of some kind, and this was probably more true for Ken's parents than Ken himself, in terms of the polio, because, I mean, he really doesn't remember what it was like for them. All of a sudden they knew that this child that they thought they were going to have and the child that they had is very, very different. So there's this reaction, the sense of loss, the grief and pain that come with that. Often there's anger that's part of that. And then there's this valley here, and that may not make much sense to put acceptance right there at the base of the valley. But the idea is that it's really a Y. And there's two different directions that one can go at some point in going downhill. And one direction is to begin to move toward acceptance and growth, and the other is to trail off into this hopelessness. And Ken mentioned about some folks just living with a real bitterness and anger, and I think those are the folks for whom hopelessness has become their closest friend, and that's a sad thing, and what an opportunity also for the church. It's scary, because to meet someone who is full of prickers that are all over and they're pushing you away, that's a difficult situation in which to minister, but also an opportunity. to show Christ's love, even to someone who's filled with pain and frustration and feeling hopeless and despairing, it's still an opportunity to show the love of Christ. And that's where the body of Christ is so important. And Ken talked about these folks who came around, his parents, his church, the folks in his neighborhood, so that he didn't have to feel like he was all by himself. That sitting there looking out the window with his milk and watching all the kids play outside wasn't his only experience in life, was always being there by himself. But he had lots of opportunities to be with others. And that is what's so crucial about the body of Christ and about caring, about the compassionate journey, is that the folks living with disabilities and their caregivers know that they're not alone, but are in the fellowship of believers and a group of folks who care, so they can start moving toward acceptance of life as it is, living with a disability, and move toward growth. So what does that look like? It looks like having a sense of hope and meaning and purpose, knowing that I can still contribute in life, and that my life is not an end with this disability. Having the courage to accept what life brings. My life is going to be a lot different, somebody might have to say to themselves, living with multiple sclerosis. It's going to be a lot different. But there's still life to be lived. There's still things that can happen in life that will be good. Staying connected to self and to others and to God. And that connection with self is that sense of recognizing and being able to admit to oneself one's own feelings about what's going on, recognizing the anger, the despair, being able to wrestle with the grief, but then also finding the courage, and especially in the company of others, the courage to be able to begin to move forward in life. And the connection to others is so important because disability can be so isolating, and chronic illness can be so isolating. John Cook, the author of this book, has chronic fatigue syndrome, and he had to quit working, even though he was not at age 65, because he simply was not able to do the work that was before him. He was a research physicist. And that was not possible for him. And so all of a sudden he moves away from work. And then he's not as able to be involved in church anymore. And then he's not involved in those relationships. And he's not able to be as involved with friendships anymore. So it's more and more isolating. He's separated more and more from the community of people with whom he was involved. And so an incredibly important part of the church is not to let that person be gone, but to hold him or her within the fellowship. And there's a variety of ways to do that, in terms of cards, of course, and phone calls, and personal visits, and as we were talking about earlier, in terms of encouraging people still to take the gifts that they have and to use them for service to God. I assume it's very possible, in fact very likely, that John never would have written this book if he had not developed chronic fatigue syndrome. So he was able to take gifts that he had and use them in a whole new way, not in spite of, but because of the fact that he was living with a disability. And that's true for so many folks, that a disability can be a new way for God to allow him or her to engage in ministry. That's not saying that it's easy by any means. And I appreciate Ken being so honest about the challenges of living with a disability. He's lived with them his whole life, and still very honest and direct about what that's like. And then the staying connected to God, that is a challenge for lots of folks. It's feeling like God has abandoned them. God, how could you allow this to happen to me? How could you allow this to come upon our family? And again, that's where the body of Christ is so important, to hold that person. I remember a great article I read years ago in the Banner, which is the Christian Reformed official magazine. And the author talked about dealing with depression and said for a long time in her life she wasn't able to pray. And for a while she felt really guilty about that. She was open about that with her pastor and said, I feel so terrible about this. I can't pray. And the pastor just said, it's okay. Right now, let us just do the praying for you. And I thought, what a wonderful way for the Christian community to come alongside someone who is struggling so that she can stay connected to God in her own way, even though, at least for a time, she wasn't even able to engage in prayer. Being open to change, of course, is an important part of moving toward the acceptance, because life is much different in living with a disability or living with a loved one with a disability. We're going to have as much time to discuss tonight as I hope, but I think we can take a little bit of time. Any comments or questions about any of this? Yes?
I just noticed that sometimes that's this maturing, the steps you have there. Because sometimes some people, even if you're not dealing with disability, you have people just growing up and understanding, what's my purpose in life, what should I be doing, and understanding that they can play a big role in life in general. So I think that process is really good, not just for what we're talking about tonight, but just for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. I won't be able to summarize everything you said, but if you weren't able to hear, he was just saying that in some ways this is talking about the process of maturing, and maybe if I can add to what you said, maturing in faith and maturing in one's walk with God is understanding, what's the purpose of my life, and I appreciate that. And maybe the reason why this comes up, especially in terms of disability, is because it's kind of like someone living with a disability, even more so, gets the wind knocked out of their sails and says, wow. Everybody else is running me off, so I suppose there's no point, I don't feel any sense, or what can I contribute when nobody else thinks I can.
I was going to say, in my experience with dealing with some of the parents whom I taught special education, how we talk about the grief process to growth is grief is also not just a one-time thing. It might be how you mentioned in the beginning, you have these expectations for this unborn child, and then when it's born with a disability, you grieve. But as they get older and they don't hit those milestones that you're expecting them to, like at 16 being able to drive a car or doing such and such, that they kind of repeat that whole grieving process again too. So in dealing with family members of somebody with a disability, it's not just to assume they're past that stage, because they hit those grief stages throughout.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, the pattern of just one nice meet you, when there's really lots of ups and downs along the way, and grief can come again and again. Or, Ken mentioned about the post-polio syndrome, or the fact that at some point you may have to face, I just can't keep up the kind of pace that I'm keeping up anymore. And there's going to be grief that will come with that. Or somebody who has multiple sclerosis, and she could walk, and now she can't walk, she has to use a wheelchair, and then she has to feed herself about 10 years from now. And there's grief that comes with each of those losses that come along the way. So thank you. Yes?
Just speaking as I'm a caregiver, my husband has a chronic illness / disability, and the greatest thing we struggle with is keeping him connected, because he will spend from now until about May not being able to attend church because he has a ventilator and he's very prone to respiratory infections. And so it's something that we work on to keep him connected, but also it's something we need the people around us to be aware of, even if they just pop in the house for 5 to 10 minutes, because he's home alone all day. Just to see him, and just for people to be aware of that fact that the elderly or something, sometimes it's just a 10-minute visit, but it helps. Breaks up the day.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. I led this workshop one time. There was a man who talked about how he had fallen like 20 or 30 feet on the concrete, hit his head, and was out of commission for like 9 or 10 months, and did mostly get better and was able to go back to work. But for those 9 months, being laid up, and there was a friend who, most of their friends were kind of scared, I don't know what to say, but one friend who would come by after work every Friday, and he said, all week I looked forward to that visit, even though he stopped by only 15, 20 minutes, and that just meant so much. So that isolation is huge and painful, and to have it all on your shoulders, that you're the only social outlet, Okay, maybe we had some group discussions, so I think we're gonna not do the one-on-one discussion now. Now, thinking about the compassionate journey. Thinking about coming alongside people who are living with disabilities.